Hello, welcome to my channel Dharma Makes, and welcome to this video where I'm going to show you how I made this display piece for my Thumbtack Dragon Egg. Link to the Dragon Egg video is in the description below. I started out with a foam core piece for the base, and I just cut a medium-sized piece and rounded off the corners, and I'm also kind of beveling the edge so that it's not square. I want it to look like just a piece of terrain, and I'm also using a lighter to go over that exposed foam. It actually melts it a little bit and closes those little holes, makes it easier to paint later. To bulk out this piece, I'm going to use a cup holder. It's made out of recycled paper already, and now I'm recycling it for the second time, so this makes me feel good about using up scraps. And I'm just using some hot glue to fix down the various pieces. My intent is obviously to make a sort of cradle or nest for the egg, and I'm using all the other pieces just to build up some elevation and fill in the gaps. And I might as well be using all the leftover pieces because I only needed just one of the cup shapes to make the nest. I will be using clay later on, but I didn't want to waste that much clay. So I'm using air dry clay to fill in the gaps and smooth out the surface of this piece. I'm also using a spray bottle with water to intermittently wet my piece, which helps the clay stick better to the paper and also helps me smooth it out with my fingers. The air dry clay that I'm using is fairly common and not very expensive. However, I really like it because it doesn't shrink when it dries, and it's quite easy to work with as long as you make sure that it doesn't dry out. After it dried for about 24 hours, I am going all over the piece with brown acrylic paint to color it. I will be basing it with different materials, but I want to make sure that none of that stark white is peeking up from under. So I have the little baggies of the materials I'm going to be using. First of all, I'm using these sort of red colored jagged pieces of stone. They kind of look like boulders at a miniature scale, but they're perfect for something like this where I would want larger things. And I'm just placing them down in a random fashion, creating clusters here and there, pressing them into the PVA glue. After I'm done with all the larger red rocks, I'm using some smaller pieces of cork. Of course, they're very light and a totally different texture, but that doesn't matter when the whole piece is painted. What I need is just the different shapes. I'm also using sort of a mix of very small pebbles for a more granular texture, and I'm just picking out patches and putting them on like that. And finally, to fill in all of the gaps, I'm going to be using a very fine grit of tiny stones, almost like sand, but it's a little bit larger particles than the sand. And it also had a really nice color. I do end up painting over it, but initially it did inspire me. I suppose this is colored sand of some kind, or like ground up rock. Unfortunately, I don't have a label and I don't remember where I got it from. When that step is done, I spray it down with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and I made a mixture of PVA glue and water, and I'm going over the entire surface, saturating all of the sand and stones. This helps make sure that none of that ground cover is ever going to flake off. This does make it wet for a very long time, but it usually dries overnight. Now I wanted to tint the whole piece into a colder color, so I made a mixture of a very dark green and a brown, and it's sort of like a wash, but then that darkened everything a bit too much, so I'm dry brushing over with a tan color. Unfortunately, with the dry brushing I've lost some of the shadows, so I'm going back in with a dark brown and shading some of the areas, which I think makes it look a lot better. Now, to add more interest to the whole piece, I decided to use some plant material. I think this is a piece of shrubbery, like the skeleton of a bush maybe that has been dried and preserved. And I'm just taking it apart, basically snipping off little twigs and pieces and kind of shaping them in a way that they sort of lie flat, so that I can attach them to the surface. And I'm just making decisions about where should everything go and whether I like this direction or not. I decided that I did like it, so I am painting over them with a sort of yellow ochre paint, because they were just too light to my taste. I think that bone white can be very interesting, but possibly in another environment. It was just a bit too much for me. So after the yellow ochre, I go all over them with the same greenish wash. And I think the final result is really nice. It even brings out some of the wood grain in the larger pieces. Now, to attach them, I had to use hot glue because of the irregular shapes, both in the twigs and the terrain. So I needed the hot glue to actually fill in those spaces. Of course, this leaves me with overspills of hot glue, but because I plan to add moss, grass tufts, and lichen, it's not gonna be a problem. Actually, yes, it's not moss at all. It's a sort of lichen that has been previously colored in these vibrant colors, and I think they sort of look like some sort of coral. Initially, I wanted this to be like a fiery terrain with alien red plants, I am not exactly able to define what this is, but it's definitely alien. And as I was creating, I realized that it doesn't just only work as a nest for the dragon egg, but I can use it as a terrain piece for miniature tabletop gaming. Because at that scale, this will look like a crater of some sort, and those tiny twigs would actually look like fallen logs. So I'm actually really happy because I don't know, at some sort of gaming session on an alien planet or an alternate dimension or anything like that, I can actually pull this piece out to set the mood and even use it as a terrain piece for combat. So I'm actually really pleased with that outcome. I've added a bunch of gooby weed grass stuffs and hid all of those areas where the hot glue might have overspilled. Of course, I fluffed up the nest so that it's nice, cozy, and comfortable for my little dragon egg. It also kind of successfully hid the shape of that cup holder because in the end I didn't do that great of a job with the clay at hiding it. And there's my little dragon egg. If you would like to see how I made it, there's a link in the description and probably at the end of the video as well. So I invite you to watch it. I'm really happy with this project. It was fun for every second of creation. The hardest part is just waiting for all of the layers to dry and the clay and the glue and all of the little things. But I think it resulted in an aesthetically unique piece, definitely different from anything I've ever done. I tend to make very grassy, foresty terrain pieces. I just seem to be unable to keep away from green moss. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this sort of crafty content, please consider subscribing to my channel. I have a lot more crafty videos and I'm publishing new ones every week. Please do let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear some feedback from you. I hope you're having a great day. Bye!